Alright, this is going to be the reality of hell, part 4. So, let's start here. But God commendeth his love toward us, in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Much more then, being now justified by his blood, we shall be saved from wrath through him. For if, when we were enemies, we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son, much more being reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. Saved from wrath. So, that would be hellfire. Let's see what happens when a Christian dies nowadays. We went over in the Old Testament how, in the Old Testament, people who live the laws, and who fulfilled the law in their hearts, it talks about in Romans chapter 2. Either them or people who were Jews, basically, went to Abraham's bosom. I believe everybody else went to hell. I guess many of these people were ungodly. But a lot of times the strangers were able to pass through Israel and their sins were cleansed. So a lot of times, I'm sure that happened. So a lot of people who probably were more righteous ended up still making it to Abraham's bosom. It says he left captivity captive. That's in Ephesians chapter 4. It says, wherefore he saith, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts unto men. Now that he ascended, what is it but that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth? He that descended is the same that also that ascended up far above all heavens, that he might fill all things. That is in reference to he went into the earth and he took the people inside of Abraham's bosom with him, because there says too that the dead arose when Jesus resurrected the first time, and they all shortly left afterwards. That's in one of the books, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So let's go back to 2 Corinthians. It says, for we walk by faith, not by sight. We are confident, I say, and willing rather to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. Right before this is, therefore we are always confident, knowing that whilst we are at home in the body, we are absent from the Lord. So that makes it pretty clear. Absent of the body, present with the Lord. It says in Genesis, and her soul was in departing, what it's talking about when Sarah died. And we just went over what is, who knoweth the spirit of man that goeth upward, in Ecclesiastes. So the whole soul sleep idea doesn't really make sense. And even if that's the case, you wouldn't perceive it and you'd just wake up at the moment of judgment. I don't think that's the case, though. That's not what the Bible says. When it says Lazarus is he is asleep, and it says plainly Lazarus is dead, it's like saying death is like the sleep of the body. It doesn't really go so much into the soul. God sort of more leaves that as a mystery, somewhat, but even in the Old Testament, it does specify, it talks about, delivered me from the lowest hell. And it talks about everlasting destruction in the Old Testament, the wicked. So, it's in the Old Testament too. It says, hell hath enlarged herself. That's a reference to Abraham's bosom being taken out. And hell enlarging itself. So, it's really important to get saved. It really is. Let's read the scriptures. You see, it says right here, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who hold the truth in unrighteousness. So it does talk about God's wrath coming through a sword too, but check this out. And well, we already ran over Revelation. That makes it completely clear. What happened? It already says that death and hell delivered up the dead which are in them. Death and hell were cast into the lake of fire. So the people who don't receive life through Jesus, through the Word, they're not written in the book of life. They're cast into the lake of fire after having been